everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Globe Interview Series. I'm your host, Sunlight, and today I'm delighted to welcome onto the show John Patrick Mullin, co-founder of MANTRA DAO. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. So, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background in banking and, how that led to your blockchain journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from the United States. I've spent a significant amount of time in my kind of adult life abroad. So went to school in Europe. So I did my bachelor's in Spain, actually, Madrid. Then I moved to Germany for my first master's, and then I ended up in Shanghai for my second master's degree in economics. At that point in time, when I graduated, I was kind of following a little bit more of a traditional path, although I had been kind of early exposed to Bitcoin. So bought my first Bitcoin, I think 2012, 2011, back in college. At that time, so I was, still on a little bit more traditional path, was, trying to work in investment banking. I ended up basically working at a Chinese securities house called Guotai Junan Securities. It's one of China's largest kind of state-owned investment banks. I was the first entry level, but one of the first Lao or Guai Lo, as they say here in Hong Kong, so foreigners who's ever worked at that company. So it was quite a unique experience being there. As kind of like the only white face, or one of the only white faces. But it was a really good experience. I really enjoyed it. And in the beginning, they really didn't know what to do with me, to be completely honest. I think they were trying to tick like, oh, we have international people box. But pretty quickly, they kind of realized that I'm a bit of a self-starter and was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to do stuff and figure, kind of push the edge of the envelope a little bit. Probably not that traditional for them, to be completely honest. But luckily, because of, partly because of that and partly because of, I guess, just, from the top down instruction, they decided that they wanted to really focus on creating a kind of a globally focused research department that covered, various emerging technologies as laid out in the 5-year plan at that time. So this included, blockchain and cryptocurrencies, machine learning, automation, like all these different kind of emerging technologies. And because I'd already been kind of interested in that, just on a personal level from years back, I kind of quickly realized that my opportunity within the firm was never going to be, a relationship banker or, kind of like an M&A guy or, a quantitative guy. I'm not a quant. I don't have Chinese skills, for example. You heard my terrible pronunciations just a second ago. So the one thing that I could do is kind of become a bit of a subject matter expert of sorts. So I kind of used that to my advantage and position myself as kind of like the blockchain crypto guy, I guess. That developed. I started obviously I was doing research on that for the firm. So we were looking at just the base level of the technology that we would then kind of write reports on and share with the kind of senior management and upper levels of the firm, hopefully trying to educate them a little bit about what this all means, how it could potentially impact the business. But in a later stage, what we were trying to do is also look at, potential proprietary investment opportunities that could come from this research as well. So the longer term idea, which I wasn't around for when they finally actually got to doing it, was to create this kind of proprietary investment emerging tech fund. That does not mean that they were investing in crypto or anything like that, but at least that was part of the kind of the broader research focus. Then kind of how I went down the crypto rabbit hole like full time, was doing a bunch of meetups and things, not just for crypto, but for general fintech companies, and inviting founders to come talk about their experiences and, all these different types of things. And we'd have drinks and whatnot. I think I was like one of the first to do this for English language in Shanghai, where I was living. Obviously around 2016, 2017, 2018, that's when crypto became, the first big public wave, I guess. We were doing a lot of crypto meetups as well. And then I got involved with some companies and ended up quitting my job to go work at this crypto company that I was helping out. Moved down to Hong Kong at that time. We grew the business down in Hong Kong. That was like my first kind of true venture into entrepreneurship. I'd never set up a business before. I never set up anything. I mean, like in the real sense. I mean, I've done small stuff on my own back when I was a kid, but nothing like this. And that blew up spectacularly. But I learned a lot from it. So took a lot of those experiences, and met a lot of my current business partners through that venture, actually. So then after that blew up, we were kind of figuring out what to do. I worked with a bunch of my current partners, getting this special license that I'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about SOMA. But then that also kind of had its own hiccups, because right when we were about to have this big breakthrough, then COVID happened, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell to do, struggling entrepreneur kind of thing. And then we founded MANTRADAO, and that's kind of a year and a half later, we've grown from 3 people to over 50 globally. So it's been quite the whirlwind journey.
That's very exciting. So like, what were your key takeaways from working in one of the biggest investment banks in China, and not just professionally, but also personally?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. To be honest, I mean, some of the things that I think really stick with me were just kind of the level of kind of, I guess in Chinese it's called guanxi, but relationships, and how they really, matter to your business network, and, how that impacts your life. So, so many of the people that we hire, or the deals that we get, or the things that we invest in, or, whatever, are from that kind of network that I've built. So it's a really powerful tool. I think the phrase is like your network is your net worth, or something like this. And I definitely believe that. So that was definitely a big takeaway for me. I think another thing was just the kind of the self belief that I kind of built during that time, that I could just do anything. And I don't mean that in like a cocky way or anything, but just go and try. It doesn't mean I'm going to succeed at it. Clearly I didn't, as I just mentioned, that I just had a massive blow up failure kind of thing. There's lots of that. But having the mindset of just go out and try it, and kind of taking those risks, has allowed me to do, a lot in my life, that a lot of people wouldn't have, the ability, or just maybe even the gumption to do, right? Maybe they do have the ability, probably even some better than I would, but they don't actually have the risk appetite to do it. And then if I could say a third one, I mean, just like understanding how I think the power of not just networking, but how certain individuals can really impact your life. So I had some people, my boss, who was a very important figure at that time, who let me do all those things, right? So I mentioned that he was like, I was working outside of my level of responsibility and doing things that probably I wasn't supposed to be doing, but he was actually conducive to supporting me. So that was a very important guy. He really impacted my life. Boss, shout out to Boss Ding. Another person that had a really big impact was a guy named Eric Sim. He's quite famous. I mean, you reached out to me on LinkedIn, but he's quite famous on LinkedIn as well. He taught me the power of kind of social media and this kind of personal branding. So I think those things, those two go hand in hand. How those certain individuals really have this like profound, deep, lasting impact on your life, and you never know where they're going to come from. And then the second piece of that was just like how you need to be a personal branding master to, in every element of your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not actually even specific to Chinese banking, but that's what I learned when I was there. So
yeah, it's a good little life skill, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you give us an introduction to MANTRADAO, and what was your motivation behind co-founding it?
So MANTRADAO is essentially, now, because it's gone through its own iterations and developments and whatnot. So originally when we started it, it was basically it's like an interoperable DeFi protocol, or it's meant to be an interoperable DeFi protocol that supported various kind of financial applications focused on kind of retail consumers, that allowed for individuals to kind of feel at home and at ease with their personal wealth and finances. So very simply, the key kind of fundamental elements that we wanted to ensure were, one, this kind of cross-chain DeFi-ness of sorts. That's obviously a technical thing that's still kind of being developed. The other thing was, a non-custodial platform. So, like a bank, which is another kind of retail-focused, platform. That's a custodial platform, right? Or a custodial product. Everything that we do is all done through smart contracts. It's all done non-custodial, in the non-custodial nature. And then the kind of the third point to mention was just that it's got to be something that the user has full control over how the actual platform is meant to be run. Whether that's all come to fruition is a bit of a different story. Obviously, developing and building startups is hard. So, we've had changes to our whole kind of business and how we've run things. But now what I can say is we still have those core elements still there. But we've created this kind of monster that has all these other different pieces to it, and it's kind of developed in how we've grown out the platform and grown the business. So now I really think that we're really focused on having a multi-chain DeFi ecosystem of sorts. So we create a bunch of different elements of what we call like the stack. Everything from, we run validator business and infrastructure, so proof of stake nodes, and infrastructure for various companies, including for ourselves, and blockchain networks. Then on top of that, you're actually building a network. We're actually building our own chain. So we're building our own chain. On top of that would be governance of the chain. So, how does that work within our system? And then on top of that, you have, you also have the actual DeFi applications themselves and the various products. So we have Launchpad, we have a staking platform, we have a money market, we have kind of a lottery pool thing, and others that we're working on and developing. So all those things have kind of morphed, and we're active on Ethereum and BSC and Polygon and Solana and Terra. Going to be launching on another one that's quite big, which I can't announce just yet. And then of course we're building our own chain. So all these things have really developed from what we originally thought of as just kind of like this Polkadot based DeFi kind of governance platform. So you can kind of see how it's grown significantly in just a year and a half. And changed.
Yeah. So how important is interoperability to MANTRADAO?
Incredibly. So you asked me before we got on, is there kind of new information that's going to be shared on this conversation in chat? One thing that only a very select group of the public are aware of at this point in time is what kind of chain framework we're going to be using, right? So are we going to be using something like Polkadot, a Polkadot parachain, which is obviously having interoperability at its core, or something else like Cosmos Tendermint? So we are actually going to be using a Cosmos Tendermint core chain for our MANTRADAO native chain. We haven't come up with a name yet, so if you have any good ideas, feel free to hit me up. Right now it's just Mantra chain, but we can probably think of something a little bit cooler. And one of the big reasons and considerations for why we chose that is because Cosmos IVC is already a functioning interoperable protocol. And this is something that's very important for us, as we want to be able to connect to projects like Luna, which we're big supporters of, or Osmosis, or some of these other ones. So interoperability is important. Like I mentioned, we're living on various chains. So, being able to basically communicate and interoperate with various different ecosystems is also important to us. So supporting the EVM suite of protocols is going to be important. One of the reasons we're looking at Evmos. And then also we're doing stuff in Polkadot as well. So Cosmos and Polkadot also have bridges. So spanning the three of those ecosystems is like about as big as you can get in crypto, I think, outside of just being in Bitcoin. So we're pretty excited about what interoperability will bring to MANTRADAO, and it's definitely a pillar of everything we're building.
Amazing. Yeah, it's very exciting to see like one DAO, across so many chains. So yeah, it's exciting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting kind of trend in the future, honestly, because you've seen a lot of the DAOs really focus on one chain. And the interesting thing that we're kind of doing is, I mentioned that kind of stack that we're looking at. Depending on how the governance works in our platform, it's basically like we have the various products that live on the various chains. So let's just use an example. Like we have a money market product that we're building on a Polkadot parachain, right? How are we going to create governance for that? It won't happen on the main tokenomics base layer where all the Ohm tokens live, right? So do we bridge tokens there? Do we create specific governance there? How does it work, particularly as they're not completely interoperable at this point in time, right? So what we've kind of decided is that at the fundamental layer of where the MANTRADAO Ohm governance tokenomics will sit, currently that's on Ethereum, but eventually that's going to be moved to our native chain. The fundamental kind of base layer will have the most important governance decisions of how various kind of token incentives are used, right? So, and as well as once we have our own chain, like how upgrades and different kind of proposals will pass within the ecosystem. That'll all happen, wherever our native token is sitting. But again, let's say on Polkadot, or let's say we have a product on Solana, or another layer one, we wouldn't necessarily vote for on-chain governance decisions on Solana on the main chain, right? So you'd have governance specific or product specific governance decisions made on Solana, for example, or on Polkadot. And that would impact just specifically that product, but not exactly how the overall kind of ecosystem is developing and how the overall tokenomics will live. So the main chain would be like, okay, we want to divert 5% of the staking reward supply to liquidity incentives on the AMM that MANTRADAO is building on Solana. We're not building an AMM on Solana. I'm just using an example. That would happen on the main chain, right? But then the actual use of those tokens would then be voted on within the Solana chain, right? So it'd say, okay, we want to incentivize, of that 5% of tokens, 1% goes to this liquidity pool, 0.5 goes here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how we've kind of divided it, just because at this point in time, it's not like you can just have one chain that kind of rules everything, if that makes sense, at least in our ecosystem.
Yeah, not yet. We'll see.
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah. So let's talk about, the kind of key pillars of MANTRADAO. So users can stake, lend, and vote. So could you maybe explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mentioned that those are kind of like some of the key products that we've built initially. So we have this multi-asset, multi-chain staking platform, and users can essentially, like, we always saw staking, at least DeFi staking. So I think it's important to differentiate. You have like proof of stake validator staking, where you're actually validating transactions on a blockchain, on a proof of stake blockchain, and DeFi staking, which is essentially staking tokens, locking them, and earning incentive rewards. So we always saw the latter, as kind of like a savings account. Obviously, there's risk involved with those savings accounts because you're generally getting paid in tokens, and those tokens have, generally are volatile in price. So it is, potentially a little bit risky. But we always saw that as like, if I'm a supporter of MANTRADAO, and I'm long MANTRADAO, I would want to stake my tokens if I'm not doing anything with them. If I'm not going to sell it, of course I want to stake it and earn yield on it, right? It's just rational. So that's kind of how we saw staking and DeFi staking in that sense. And we support, a bunch of different staking chains, and different pools on the various chains. But on the kind of the POS side, it's also a very important pillar for MANTRADAO. Just the validator staking. That's actually one of our core businesses, is running this infrastructure, running these validator nodes for these POS chains. And actually, we built that into our tokenomics because, again, MANTRADAO token currently is living mainly on Ethereum. It's also on BSC and Polygon and all these others, but the main tokenomics live on Ethereum. But the validator business that we run supports, 20 to 30 different blockchains, right? And we earn token rewards from those, and that's a big revenue stream for the DAO. But basically, we've built it in so that part of those like token rewards and revenues are basically used to buy back the token supply on Ethereum, the OHM token supply. So we're constantly diluting and buying back the OHM token, making it more scarce. So that's one of the kind of the key elements. The other pillar I think you said was lending and borrowing. This is important. Obviously, we want people to have other utilities that they can do with their tokens. And our platform, you can support, I think we support, over 40 different tokens that you can lend and borrow against. And it's all done in a permissionless nature. So you can, supply something like Ethereum or OHM tokens or Bitcoin or whatever. And you can go take a loan without, me being a creditor saying, okay, this is your credit rating. This is what you can do. It's all done via smart contracts and permissioning and various kind of interest rate factors and whatnot. So they can go take loans and stable coins if they want. That works really well in a bull market. You run the risk of getting liquidated in a bear market, of course. But yeah, that's one of the definite pillars for sure. Like for me, I am, and like anyone in our community knows this, I don't ever sell OHM tokens, like literally never. I just take loans against it. And also it's a useful tool because you don't have to incur capital gains tax if you're not necessarily selling tokens, right? So it's another kind of tool. And then the voting, that obviously goes back to the governance, and that's just a critical thing that we just kind of mentioned. And in our platform, it's becoming more developed and more developed. And I believe as we move towards launching our actual native chain, the on-chain governance suite is going to be significantly developed, and to the point where right now I still have a lot of say in how things run, to be completely honest, or my other partners. We want to move it towards a more DAO model where it actually starts really being community driven completely, and we can step away from a lot of the the actions that are driving the business. That being said, we've also taken steps so that the DAO itself and the tokens and whatnot are insulated from some of the other kind of elements of the business that have to be kind of Chinese walled away from something like that, just because of regulatory concerns or tax concerns or all this different things. So we do try to run it like a business, but at the same time, the DAO is an important part of it.
Absolutely. So the decentralized part of
Absolutely.
the DAO.
Yeah, absolutely.
So JP, what about SOMA.finance? So I heard that MANTRADAO is setting up a regulated DeFi platform in the US. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So remember when I was mentioning in the beginning that I met some of my current business partners through the failed initial kind of experience into entrepreneurship and crypto full time. So basically, back at that point in time, we had this idea about creating a compliant, regulated, multi-asset exchange platform, so you could trade cryptos, stocks, equities, ETFs, commodities, whatever, all under one kind of one-stop shop. So some of our business partners at the time, they had this special license, or they had a broker-dealer license in the United States, excuse me. And we basically went it and we took it and we went to FINRA and we're like, okay, we want to issue private placements of tokenized securities using this traditional broker-dealer license. And they were like, absolutely no, don't do it. It's not the same. Stop, cease, desist. Do not do it, right? Like, okay. So then we started this kind of 2.5-year long process roughly that, going back and forth to the SEC and FINRA. And fast forward, and we basically got this very interesting license issued to be kind of the first broker dealer, one of the first, as far as we know, one of the first. I have to qualify that statement, to have this license that allows us to issue compliant tokenized securities on blockchain. And the interesting thing about our license is it allows us to basically be broad-based and all-encompassing, so we can do any different type of regulatory filing of this private placement, from a institutional filing of a Reg D all the way down to a regulation CF, or Reg CF, which is a smaller retail offering, and everything in between. But on top of that, we can also do these types of offerings on any different blockchain infrastructure, permissioned and permissionless, whether it's ETH, Solana, Hyperledger, whatever, we can do it. Since then, anyone that we've seen that's been issued something similar, they get maybe a Reg D for institutional, and then they only get like Hyperledger permission chain. So it's not the same, right? We have the most broad-based and the most encompassing license, and it's very unique and special. So we got that license, and basically we went out and tried a test case. So we went out to this basketball player, and I actually reached out to him, similar to how you guys reached out to me, on LinkedIn. I'm a huge basketball fan. Never thought that I would talk to a famous basketball player via LinkedIn. Couldn't be further from the truth, but it couldn't be further from how it actually happened. But I ended up doing it, and basically we reached out to him, and we're like, okay, we see that you're doing this tokenization of your earnings, your player earnings. This is going to be a security in the United States. We have the licensing to do it. We can help you with this offering. So long story short, went with 2 other different broker dealers. Both of them got nixed by the SEC and FINRA because they didn't have the licensing. Finally, they came back to us. We actually did the transaction, issued the first compliant tokenized security in the United States, as far as we know, outside of like real estate deals and stuff. So one of the first like legitimate compliant ones. That around that time was like right when that deal closed was the beginning of the COVID pandemic, like March 2020, in the US at least. That was like right when it started hitting in the US. So not great timing to close that. The world is, imploding pretty much. And, from that, we basically kind of took that experience and understanding and embarked on this kind of new process. So then myself and some of the other my other partners on the MANTRADAO side, we ended up founding MANTRADAO. So we built this platform, like we mentioned, but it has staking and lending and has a launch pad and has a bunch of different other things. So focusing specifically on the launch pad and how it all kind of wraps back up into Soma, we had this idea that a launch pad was an interesting product to have within a DeFi suite of products, but it's very commoditized, right? Like it's not a difficult product to build. Everyone's going to make one, and it doesn't really have a whole unique set of value proposition. So we're like, okay, we realized this before we even built it. We're like, there's got to be something else. Otherwise, it's not really going to be that valuable for, a couple months. And we were completely right. I mean, everyone has a launchpad now. But what we realized is that, we can actually use this launchpad tech plus the Tritorian licensing of the broker dealer And we can do this combining both the tech with the actual compliance and licensing behind it. So we went back to our partners at the broker dealer. These guys are named Bill and Jim. They're based in the United States. Who we're going to go see in like the next 2 weeks, in New York. And we're like, okay, let's combine these two things that are quite powerful. And then that's when we kind of got started, spitballing these ideas again. And we're like, okay, well, why don't we actually create a regulated infrastructure that uses this DeFi user experience, but actually maintains AML and KYC compliance? It allows for kind of a permissionless / kind of Web3 experience where you're doing it all via non-custodial wallets. It's not like a centralized exchange platform, right? But it's also retail friendly. So that's a very critical part. So basically what we've created is we built like kind of a suite of DeFi products that include a token issuance, launchpad, so capital raising and issuance, an AMM or DEX. And we're going to be building, lending, staking, and all these other different kind of DeFi primitives that are very important to have in a kind of DeFi suite. But in order to actually access that, you have to go through a KYC and AML process that is then going to be approved by a FINRA Series 24 compliance officer. So we maintain AML and KYC compliance. You basically come onto the platform, do your KYC AML, and you say, okay, I'm John Patrick Mullin. I'm from the United States. I'm a accredited investor, or I'm a retail investor. Yada, yada, yada. Here's my wallet address. I connect them. We do our KYC and AML checks. We verify the address. We verify the identity. And then based off of whatever information I provided on the back end, we know exactly what you can access, what products you can touch. So if I'm a retail investor, I can only touch these products. If I'm an institutional investor, I can touch everything. Or if I'm from the US, I can touch this, but I can't touch that kind of thing. And we do that all through a kind of a permissioning system on the back end. But you still have the same experience like you're trading on Uniswap, for example. If you ever use Uniswap, it's the same exact thing. I mean, literally we forked Uniswap for the AMM for the start. But we have that compliance infrastructure on the front end. And we also are, because of the licensing with the broker dealer, we can add different asset classes. So not only can we do cryptos, but we can do tokenized versions of equities, ETFs, commodities, etc., that we can have put onto a kind of a DeFi experience where you can stake them, you can lend them, you can trade them in an AMM, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite an interesting kind of concept. A lot of people say DeFi and regulation don't go hand in hand, but I think you can still maintain at least certain elements of a DeFi experience, including the non-custodial nature, the permissionless elements of trading, the peer-to-peerness of trading, lending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think they're necessarily totally against each other, right? So yeah, that's pretty much SOMA.finance. We've raised, we just closed our seed round. Well, technically we closed it in November, but we announced it in just a couple of weeks ago, which is led by Animoca Brands. I know you had Yat Su, the CEO and chairman, on not too long ago on the show. So shout out to him and Animoca. And we're going to be launching in the next coming months, and we're really excited about what's ahead. We're still fundraising, and that's going amazingly well. So we're really excited about the prospects.
Yeah, it is very exciting. And honestly, I wish you all the best with that venture. So can you tell us about any future plans for MANTRADAO and, any exciting killer products that you're working on that you can tell us about, of course?
Yeah. So obviously we're building our own chain, which I think is going to be quite cool. SOMA, I think it's in and of itself, has a lot of tie-ins to the MANTRADAO tokenomics. So for example, users who are staking the MANTRADAO OM token on our platform will be entitled to claiming an airdrop of SOMA tokens. And actually we've created, I think it's 4% of the entire token supply is going to OM stakers. That'll be distributed over time. So it's basically a good way to seed our community and basically bring all the MANTRADAO users over to SOMA, and basically, I guess, incentivize them to come and KYC and join the platform. But we think this is going to be a good. I'm not giving forward-looking statements. This is not financial advice, but in theory, if the token price of SOMA does very well, it'll have a knock-on effect of, oh wow, well I can just go earn that if I buy OM and stake it as well. So we think they are going to be very kind of beneficial to each other from that perspective. Because of the chain that we're building, it's going to be a general purpose interoperable DeFi focused chain. Obviously that'll be, a chain that's going to immediately integrate on SOMA as well once we've completed it, right? So we think we've got a killer app with SOMA. and the chain will, again, like we pushed users over to the AMM and to the SOMA platform. Then we're going to pull the TVL and the users back to our chain when we integrate onto the Mantra chain, or hopefully the name that we come up with later from the SOMA side. And then outside of that, we're working on another kind of native Mantra kind of DAO and DEX that's on another kind of up and coming layer one. I can't mention that one specifically, but be excited. We're going to do similar kind of tokenomic things where MANTRADAO OM participants will be incentivized to use that platform as well. So those are kind of like the three main things. A lot of trading activity going on over here. And then, of course, I guess the validator business is a core pillar of everything we do here. And we're really, we really are kind of institutionalizing that business. We're talking to a bunch of different large custodians and kind of institutional high net worth clients and asset managers and whatnot to really kind of build up what we call AUD, assets under delegation, from kind of staking delegators. So a lot of stuff, a lot of work ahead, but pretty excited for what's in store.
Absolutely. It is very exciting. So best of luck with that. So that concludes our interview. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to our channel. If you'd like to see what John gets up to at MANTRADAO, please follow the links in the description box. Also, if you have any thoughts on what you think the Mantra native chain should be called, leave a comment down below. We'd love to know. I'm Sunlight, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.